we just had a session on sampling and sampling design last week. That session was actually a transition between phase one of the workshops, which was mainly on the introductory aspects of the research process. Now, when we just started when we start talking about sampling, and as we are going to continue from today, then we will start talking about collecting data. It is phase two, which is mainly on data collection. So I actually forgot to mention this last week, that we have just concluded the first phase and we entered on the second one. And I think the next phases would be the one on data analysis. And the last one, the very final one, would focus on presenting the data, presenting the research findings and writing up, compiling up a research report. So when we approach that one, would be finalizing. Otherwise, we continue to engage. There are many topics that we can still continue to engage on. But today the workshop is on interviews, as as was circulated, and I even repeated. I reminded us last week when we closed that the interviews would be the focus of this workshop today. The first focus would be on defining interviews, what interviews are, or what an interview is. Then we move forward to understand what types of interviews are there, are known in literature. We present those, we try and discuss them, so that we can shed light. And this indeed helps us to make a choice when we want to pursue research, or when we want to undertake research, particularly qualitative research. We will focus on qualitative research. Where necessary, reference would be made to either mixed methods research or quantitative research. Then we will also look at situation during interviews. This is mainly about the interaction during the process of interviewing. What happens? What does an interviewer do, and what does the research participant do, and how does the environment look like? Then as we move towards the end, we would try to answer a question of how many interviews, to know how many interviews we should have. Then lastly, we would look at the final product. What type of a final product do we expect to have if we have got good interviews? And I want us to continue from now. As an introduction, I've said that we have, in the past, we've been talking about the research process as part of the introduction. No, all the workshops were mainly part of the introduction to the research process. But during the engagements in those workshops, reference was always made to qualitative research. Sometimes I did make mention of quantitative and mixed methods research. But today, if we look at qualitative research, it would be the focus. It would be interviews with respect to collecting qualitative data. And that is what should happen after we shall have finalized our proposal, and when we are now to go to the field. I know that we do field preparation, but as soon as we are in the field, particularly when we're collecting qualitative data, we then use interviews. And that is why it is said here, this workshop serves as a bridge between the previous workshops, focusing on techniques of data collection. And I've already said that we've all been introduced to some of this because the research process is reiterative. I've said that. Thus, we will be approaching our workshop from the data collection side rather than the introductory approach adopted in earlier workshops. AST argues that there are 4 primary techniques of data collection that are used in qualitative research, and these, as we can list, are interviews, there are focus groups, observations, and document review. But there are other available techniques, including visual analysis and biography, which sometimes are used independently or supplementary to one of the main forms. Other authors do not see them as supplementary. They are just listed as now, at least in other words, other authors would list 6 instead of listing 4. But in terms of West, he thinks the primary ones are those 4, the interviews, the focus groups, observations, and document reviews. Some other people would call focus groups as focus groups interviews. So this depends on the terminology of the author. So there are different terminologies can be used differently by different authors. But the point is, we do have a number of data collection techniques. So interviews is part of them. So in future workshops, apart from focusing today on these interviews, we will also be able to focus on the others. We will be able to focus on focus groups, interviews, and observations, as well as document review. And the focus on each of these techniques in future will actually enhance our understanding of the research process, and it will be able to produce, to present to us a number of options on how to collect qualitative data. Now, I think as we continue, there are other approaches that have not been mentioned. For an example, I thought I should have a special dedication, a special workshop dedicated on participatory action research. This is precisely because the manner in which you collect data in this design differs from how you collect data through other techniques. So it means when time goes on, I would add participatory action research as the 5th focus of collecting data. And it means we can also have an option of using it if we feel that the other techniques do not satisfy us or we are not comfortable with them. Then that will depend on the individual researchers. Interviewing people is at the heart of qualitative research. Most authors think that if you're talking about interviews, it means you're talking about face-to-face interview. But others have made a distinction amongst various types of interviews. This what they refer as telephone interviews, face-to-face interviews. Some can also use online interviews such as Microsoft Teams. Remember, with Microsoft Teams, you can see a person, and in Microsoft Teams you can record, and it would be easy. The transcription would differ because you can have a transcribed script that you can just edit, but with a telephone interview you do not. So that is the difference between Teams, Microsoft Teams interview, and telephone interview. So those two are different, although they are online. Interviewing people is not merely a way to collect data, but an intrinsically rewarding activity. highly rewarding activity. And this is an interaction between two people that holds the potential for greater understanding and interpersonal development. And I always tell people that if you are a beginning researcher, and you want to have the best experience, face-to-face interviews are the best technique of collecting data, because there you get educated. This is the reason why the last statement says it is an interaction between two people that holds the potential for greater understanding and interpersonal development. Remember, here you will be able to see a person. You can touch a person can touch you, and that you will be able to observe and hear. But with the other uh, techniques of collecting data, you might find that a human being is not closer to you. So you miss that opportunity. In my first um, project, I used face-to-face interview, and that was the best opportunity that was offered to me, to be educated by a respondent. Because I thought that I was going to collect data, but what developed between myself and the research participant was something that led to my development and to the development of the research participant. So we both benefit, and I appreciate this. Not to say that other techniques are not good, they are good. And that is why I say preference choice depends on the interest of the researcher himself or herself. I like many of our daily interactions with others that are fairly shallow and mundane. Sitting down with a person for an hour or two, you see, and really listening to what they have to say is profound and deep enterprise. One that can provide not only data for you, the interviewer, but also self understanding and a feeling of being heard for the interview. See, the interviewee can appreciate that he or she can participate in a research and actually contribute to the development of the student. And if the research topic is about social justice or community development, so the participant would also be grateful, feeling that she or he is also contributing to community development or social justice. So it builds both the interviewer, the researcher, and the research participant, as I've indicated earlier on. I always appreciate interviewing with a deep appreciation for the opportunity it gives me to understand how other people experience the world. This is a direct quotation from Hest. Um, but everybody has got his own experience, and it is important also to respect other people that are giving you information, because what they are giving, you would not be able to find it anywhere. And I tell you, every interview engagement is unique on its own, because people are different and the study context is so different. I always approach, sorry, that said, there is not one kind of interview, but many, and some of these are shallower than others. And now, okay, I will define what interview is and then have a pause. But let's just look at the first definition of what an interview is. An interview can be variously defined as a conversation with a purpose. You see, that is a very brief definition by Loon and Begg. I just quoted them from Hest. But this is a very short definition. An interview can be variously defined as a conversation with a purpose. So in other words, it is indicated here that you cannot have an interview, particularly if you are a researcher, without a specific purpose. And the specific purpose is to gather data that is going to support the research topic. And the the student engages on a study in order to contribute to the body of knowledge And if that student is doing it for academic purposes, then one purpose is to actually achieve a specific qualification. An interview can also be defined as an attempt to understand the world from the point of view of the person being interviewed, to unfold the meaning of people's experiences, to uncover their lived world prior to scientific explanations. That is another interview. Again, an interview is a form of active listening in which the interviewer steers the conversation to subjects and topics of interest to their research, but also manages to leave enough space for those interviewed to say surprising things. So it means uh, you in an interview, an interviewer must make sure that the information provided to him or her is supporting the objective or the purpose. Remember, we dealt with the purpose statement, we dealt with objectives, we dealt with research questions. So when the interview is going on, I want to achieve those objectives and I want to answer those questions. My interviews are actually based on the purpose of the study. So the discussion and the responses are in line with the subjects and the topics of interest. Yes, and we respect, as I said, we need to respect where the information comes from. In other words, the respecting a person who is the source of the information is the interviewee respect the person who can be the only one who gives what we think will contribute to our purpose and our objectives. Achieving that balance, that you get something and the interviewee or the research respondent, so the research participant gets something, is another balance, which is tricky. It's a tricky thing. And this is why most practitioners believe interviewing is both an art and a science. I want to say that it's interview, when time goes on, the researcher who might have started as a novice, as a learner, he he or she grows. He gathers momentum. They gather momentum. They start understanding the process of research, which includes interviewing, collecting data, and then uh, that is what is said to be an art and science. So they start mastering the skill. They start doing it better. Although you cannot be perfect, you cannot be 100%, but at some stage you will see that you start enjoying it and you feel that now I'm starting to master the techniques, the strategy, and the approach. Whereas we just have started by preparing a proposal, which was also seemingly was a mountain to climb. But at the end, you finalize. And when you are finalized and ready to go to the field, you are to implement the research proposal, which is a project proposal, which is to be implemented in field. So at a later stage during the course of implementation, you start enjoying. And then after you have just done maybe 2, 3 studies, then you start to feel that now, yes, I'm standing up now. I'm becoming very right. There are some students who are natural interviewers, but anyone can learn to conduct interviews, and in everyone, even those of us who have been doing this for years, can improve their interviewing skills. And used to say, you cannot be perfect, but you can be better than yesterday. So that is why Hest is saying, even those who have been doing it for years, for more years, they still have to learn. That is why, from time to time, there are new books that are written about procedures, processes, approaches to conducting research, whether it is quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods, or whether it is specific, it is interviews, or whether it is focus groups, or any other approach. So, learning does not stop. That is why most of us are going to contribute to the body of knowledge, and that body of knowledge is what is being contributed by us, so others do not know. But this is what others would continue to learn on. Now, Hest says that there are others who are natural interviewers. This is mainly because people are differently talented or differently gifted. There are people who are good at interviewing and people who are not good at it. Here, he uses the word introvert, and introverts, to me, it means that these people do not speak a lot. They keep quiet, but they allow others to speak. So I don't know why he says these people are good, because I thought people who are good in social sciences, there are those who are facilitators, those who are interacting a lot, are the people that speak a lot, and they are extroverts. I don't know. That is why I say what authors write should always be construed as guidelines, but not as instructions. This might be a good time to highlight the fact that the interview is a product between interviewer and interviewee, and that this product is only as good as the rapport established between the two participants. Yes, the interview belongs to the two, and I've already said the interviewee can benefit, the interviewer will always benefit. And then what we call the interview can only be there and can only be called an interview when there are interactions, and the interaction is between the two, either the interviewee and the researcher, or the researcher and a group of interviewees. In focus groups, we talk about a group of people where the interviewer is actually a facilitator, so that he can gather data. But the most important aspect is that interaction itself is a product of the the two side, one who's gathering data and one who's providing data. And we believe that the two of them must enjoy and must benefit from it. In Ask, a Patton makes the argument that we use interviews because there are certain things that are not observable. Colleagues, we cannot observe the feelings, and no one can see what I'm thinking, and no one can tell me my intentions before they can see my movements. So interviews are needed, actually, so that we can understand the feelings, we can understand the thoughts, and we can understand the intentions. So interviews are there to explore feelings, thoughts, and intentions. So we can know these things that are hidden, that are beneath, that are inside human beings. We cannot observe behaviors that took place at some previous point in time. You see, if things have happened last year or yesterday, how do you know unless you can hear from someone? So hearing, actually interviewing, is an opportunity for hearing how the behavior that took place yesterday or that took place last year happened. Something that took place in the past could then be heard through the interviews. We cannot observe situations that preclude the presence of an observer. Yes, you see now, even if I've got eyes to see and other things are observable, but if I was not there, I would not be able to see it. If a car was traveling in a high speed, and the traffic copper was not on the road, he did not put a radar on the road or the speed trap, or didn't put a camera there, he will not be able to tell you that you were running in a very tremendous speed, because he was not there, he was not observing. So if he had a radar there, he had a camera there, or he had any other traffic trap that would measure the speed at which you are traveling, that person is an observer and he can tell you that. But in the absence of that, then we can interview you tomorrow at which speed you were traveling. You will tell us you were traveling at 140 or you were traveling at 160. If you are at court and there's no proof that you were traveling at one court, you are going to be exonerated and you will be acquitted. So interviews are very, very important. They reveal things that observers did not see because they were not there. We cannot observe how people have organized the world and the meanings they attach to what goes on in the world. It is only known into them because it is hidden in them. Then we want it to be revealed through the interviews. We want to meet them. We want to speak to them and ask them specific questions so that they can respond. And then they reveal meanings that they attach to the world, and then they reveal what goes on in the world. We have to ask people questions about those things. Actively listening is the key to establishing this necessary rapport. That is a closing statement on how we were defining interviews. And I'm going to pause here so that I establish if we're moving together, and I give an opportunity for questions and comment. And I'm going to pause the presentation mode, and I'm going to enter so that I can see if hands are raised and if there's something on the chat. The floor is open now for comments. We are now going to look at the types of interviews, because interviews are actually different. Now, the first aspect that I'm going to talk about here is actually the continuum that is there in the different types of interviews. Imagine a continuum from unstructured to structured interviews or discussions. And now here we want to take an example of unstructured conversations, the kind you have with your friends. Remember, in that type of discussions or interactions, no one is in control of those conversations. And what you talk about is often random. Whatever pops into your head, you can talk about. Remember, if I'm talking with my friends, I'm not collecting data, and no one is collecting data. My friend is not collecting data. So that is called unstructured, it's an unstructured engagement or an unstructured interview, because what is interview, we're exchanging words. I'm talking, I respond, I can ask, I can comment, my friend can comment, we can ask each other questions, and we can respond to each other, we can make various comments. But in that case, there is no secret. There is also sometimes no underlying purpose to your talking. So a friend can just be talking with a friend, nicely greeting each other. I haven't seen you yesterday, and oh, that sports ground, it was so interesting. We could buy snacks there, or we could sit on the bench watching soccer teams playing. The purpose is to talk to and engage with each other. And the words you use and the things you talk about are a little beside the point. But let me say something here. I want to make my comment because the author says sometimes there is no underlying purpose except the purpose to talk to and engage with each other. But it can't be true if I take an example of talking about soccer. I'm discussing the results between Moroka Swallows and Kaizer Chiefs, or I'm discussing their status. I'm saying Moroka Swallows has become a very strong team these days because they managed to defeat Kaizer Chiefs 1-0. So I think I do have a purpose there. I'm sharing my feeling and my perceptions, my perspective about the two teams with my friend. I don't know. Anybody who reads this book or this author can make a determination if he thinks talking to your friends, indeed, there is no purpose. But what it boils to, he is just trying to motivate that those conversations are structures, and he wants to show that they are not recorded, they are not formalized, as in the case of an interview, because there you are collecting data, you've got a specific purpose. An unstructured interview, according to the author, is a little like this informal conversation. Now, there he uses another terminology. He sees unstructured interview as informal conversation, except that one of the parties to the conversation, you who is the researcher, does have an underlying purpose, and that is to understand the other person. Oh, now he is saying an unstructured interview is he is comparing it with that discussion between two colleagues. Now, here he says, if we go back to the research process, we can have an unstructured interview. But the only difference between that one for collecting data is indeed that there is data collection, that the researcher wants to have an unstructured interview in order to collect data, whereas two friends do not have the aim of collecting data, and they don't want to achieve the purpose of the study or the objectives. Yeah, but then if you are an interviewer and your interview is unstructured, you want to benefit from it and build up and finalize your studies. And in that way, you are not friends speaking for no purpose, but it might feel just as unstructured to the interviewee in this scenario. And the interviewee is saying, the author is saying, the interviewee sometimes would not even see the importance of that interview in the way that the researcher sees it. You see, remember when in earlier slides, I said the interviewee and the interviewer. So, okay, let's say the study, the researcher and the study participant should both benefit. And we just said the product of the interview is actually the product between the two, and it is a product of engagement. But here, now, another perspective is brought here, that the manner in which the study participant sees the interview process is not the way that the researcher sees it, because the researcher has got a different agenda, whereas the study participant, the respondent, does not have the same agenda. That is one side of the continuing colleagues. On the other hand, now we've just heard about an unstructured interview, but on the other hand, or the other side, we've got fully structured and standardized survey type questions asked face to face. And colleagues, I want you to note the statement survey type questions, because today I want to answer a question of what a survey is. As we go along, it will become even clear. But here we are being introduced to a different type of an interview, which is referred to as a fully structured and standardized survey type questions asked face to face. Here, it is very clear who is asking the questions and who is answering them. Because this is structured. We know that the researcher, the researcher or the student is the one that is going to ask questions, because he's the one that is asking questions. Can be a professor, can be a PhD student, can be an honors student, can be any doctor who is no longer studying to get a qualification, but to advance and to advance his knowledge and contribute to the body of knowledge. Yeah, it is very clear that all of those are the people that are asking questions. And somebody who is going to answer is the study participant, is the research participant, who is the respondent or an interviewee. This does not feel like a conversation at all. It seems that the other one is being robbed, because he's being asked questions and this person is responding. A lot of people new to interviewing have this erroneously in mind when they think about interviews as data collection. Somewhere in the middle of these two extremes, cases is the semi-structured interview, in which the researcher uses an interview guide to gently move to conversation to certain topics and issues. Now, hey, we are we have just had there's something that is called uh, unstructured interviews. We also hear that there is fully structured or structured interviews, but another concept is being introduced here is semi-structured. It means it's not fully structured, and it means it is not unstructured. It is structured but not fully. It is different from unstructured and different from fully structured. So this is semi-structured interview. Here, the researcher uses an interview guide to gently move to conversation to certain topics and issues in the process of collecting data. This is the primary form of interviewing for qualitative social scientists and will be what uh, the author in his book continued to refer as interview for the rest of his book. So I said I can mimic him in this workshop and refer to it as interviewing, or refer interviewing to mean semi-structured. But let us not do that for the purpose of this workshop. Let's just allow ourselves to explore the different types so that we can understand which ones they are. But if in our writing we want to adopt the term interview to mean semi-structured, we can do so, but we have to justify it at the beginning of the document or the research report or even the research proposal. Now, we are going to move from this continuum and we're going to zoom into specific in this types of interviews that were mentioned. In other words, unstructured, semi-structured, and fully structured. These three types of interviews. And we start now with unstructured conversations, which is referred to as informal interviews. Now, this is the most open-ended approach to interviewing. It is particularly useful in conjunction with observational methods. It is useful with observational methods. And I think its application would also differ in the way that other interviews are applied. I will hear as we continue. There are no predetermined, here you don't have questions. There are no predetermined questions. So nothing has been written. We don't have an interview guide and we don't have a questionnaire, because questions are written in an interview guide or in a questionnaire. So here, there is no predetermined questions. So there is nothing that has been written. Each interview will be different. And now I present an example here. Imagine you are researching the rent show. That includes business in the rent show. You would have businesses presenting their own exhibits. You would have other companies that have brought children's play so that they can entertain people that visit the rent show. You would be having cafeteria so that those that feel hungry do not have to drive away from rent show, but they can eat. There is a food court somewhere where there are a number of restaurants and people can go and have refreshments there. And then you also have organs of state. You've got government departments that are presenting their programs that they run in service delivery. So you have a lot of people walking around different exhibition stalls. They want to see what each of the business or offer, or what types of plays are there. Some are busy taking their children there to go and play so they can relax. And even the elders sometimes even play there. There are cafeterias, those that are hungry are doing that. So there's up and down movement. And that is where you get your people to interview. In this type of interview, it is unlikely that you will be able to get a person to sit down with you and talk intensely about a set of questions for an hour and a half. No, because people didn't come here to be interviewed by you. They are busy with their own activities. And remember, last week when we spoke about sampling designs, there is what we call convenience sampling. And I think this is the type of sampling design that can assist uh, in this type of interviews. Because you are at Rand Show, you just decide, I want to research the Rand Show. So where do you get people to tell you about Rand Show? You can only get it from the participants who are in the Rand Show. Sometimes you can even go and meet a person who is manning a stall. So a person who is manning a stall is busy manning the stall. Is not conducting interviews. So when clients move and come to visit the stall, he will not be able to listen to you anymore. So that is why you can conveniently interview those people that are available at the very same time. So these people do not have time. So the time that will be there, that will they spend with you is less than an hour. You cannot sit with them for long now, but you might be able to sidle up the several people, and you can engage with them about their experiences at the fair. You can ask them anything about a rent show and they can respond to you. You might have a general interest in what attracts people to these events or what attracts people to the rent show. So you could start a conversation by asking strangers or anybody there why they are there at the rent show or why they come back every year to visit the rent show. That's it. So you don't have a lot of questions and you don't have them predetermined, but you just decide that you're going to ask them about their experiences. Then you have a conversation that lead you anywhere. Maybe one person tells a long story about how their parents brought them here when they were a kid. Eh? Rand water, you see, sorry, Rand show has been there a long time ago, since the early, when was it? The early 90s. 90, I think in 1993, I was in Renshaw already. I used to visit Renshaw. So from 1993 to date, it's at least 20, he is 30, it's actually 31 years old. A person who was born that time has graduated, has got an honors or a master's degree, and that person is already working. So they can tell you the time when their parents took them to Renshaw, when they were still at school or when they were still kids, when they used to play there. So this is what can start your data collection. A second person talks about how this is better than watching soccer, how visiting Ren show is better than watching soccer, because it doesn't mean that other activities would stop. So soccer teams would still play even when Ren show is on. A third person shares their favorite traveling band, and yet another uh, emphasis about the public library in the woods. They can tell you anything while you meet them. But the point is, you did not arrange with them, and that you are meeting them at that area, in that area, because that is where rent show takes place almost on an annual year. So on an annual basis, rent show takes place there. Now, during your conversation, you also talk about a lot of other things, the weather, anything for sale, the fact that a favorite food booth has disappeared. You can talk about anything. In other words, this is just an example. But you may not be able to record these conversations because some of them are so irrelevant. Some of them are indeed relevant. But what do? You might jot down notes on the spot. And then when you have the time, you can write down as much as you can remember about the conversation in in this long field notes. But I don't know. This author did not say anything about using a recording device so that when you write down the notes, actually listen to the recording device, which can remind you of the engagement and the discussions when you are at Rand show. Later, you will have to sit down with these field notes and try to make sense of all the information. So this type of behavior of recording of or presenting data or analyzing data and transcribing data, and I'm just starting to hear it from this person now because he's talking about unstructured conversations. The most common way of collecting data is when somebody is speaking, you are indeed recording with a recording device, or you're writing, you're taking notes. You take notes of everything that you have asked, because there will be questions, preset questions, and those preset questions are actually based on our research objectives and research purpose of the study, the research topic, as we've been discussing earlier on. But here, you don't have that luxury of making sure that you streamline the questioning in line with the with any predetermined or pre-written questions. And I want to stop here so that we can, if there are questions that focus on unstructured conversations, then they can be posted. And if there are comments that about unstructured conversations, we can also hear them.
Maybe from my side, I would like to find out if is it advisable as a researcher to use this kind of interview method? Because as I'm listening, it's like it's haphazard. Because like the example that you gave, at the end of the day, one might not get the gist of uh, maybe what one was trying to study or follow. Thank you.
Eh, Yes, thank you very much
I
for the
hope I'm
question.
clear.
You are very clear. And remember when we were dealing with convenience sampling design, I said I personally do not prefer that one, because you cannot just meet someone conveniently, because it will be very difficult for the person to pay attention to you. So here they advise us to just go to Renshaw and do this. I, for one, would not prefer to use this approach, because if I want to understand and research Renshaw, what I can do is to go to Renshaw, then visit different stalls. I can make an appointment with a number of them if they are willing to give me some time so that I can interview them. Some people might even get interested on that, because others might be researchers, educational institutions. You know, when I decided to study with the China University of Technology, is when I went to a show. Then at the show, I met one of the study leader who eventually became my study leader. And I started talking to him about the work that he does, because he was representing China University of Technology, and he had an exhibition presenting what they offer there under their department. It was management and economic sciences, where tourism management was fully. So there, that guy from that day, um, he, he, we became friends, and I started to propose to have a meeting with him. Then we eventually became colleagues, because I studied under him. He led my study, and it was very interesting. So I think there are people who have got purpose there, and your visit to them, requesting them to participate in your study, might also bear fruit. They can say, no, today I'm working, but you can interview me tomorrow. And in other words, if we start doing that, we are deviating from this interview type of interview, because we would also want to go with prepared questions. So this interview approach or technique would be falling away. Then, in other words, we would be favoring other interview techniques than this one. And I, for one, do not like this one. I like either semi-structured or structured. You will see when we move forward the benefits of using those. And if there are challenges, then we can look at them together and discuss them. Now, we are going to a different type, or the second type of interview. This technique is referred to as semi-structured interview. And look, they just put semi-structured interview in bracket, and they start by showing interview guide, which, in other words, um, demonstrate that in semi-structured interviews, you use an interview guide. If it was me, I would have written semi-structured interview outside the bracket, and I would have put interview guide inside the bracket. But this author decided to do that one, and I followed his logic. But it doesn't mean that this is a blueprint we had to follow. No, we can do it, play around and juggle around in the way that it makes sense to us. But semi-structured interviews uh, are primary types employed by social science qualitative researchers. And here, I think the author has is showing preference of this technique than other techniques. The, the researcher creates an interview guide in advance, which she or he uses in every interview. In other words, unlike going to rent show without any predetermined questions. Now, the interview guide would have captured questions that need to be asked. And by the way, it's not specific questions. It captures topics, a number of topics. Later on, we would be told that this might be between 5 to 10, but these are topics to be covered during interviews. So they are not very specific. So I go with them when I go to to rent show, and I know that I would ask specific questions. Ask questions that are under specific headings. And when a respondent deviates and they go away, then I bring them back to that topic, because the way I've written the topics in the interview guide is in line with the objectives and the purpose of the study. In theory, um, every person interviewed is asked the same questions. If we are using an interview guide under the semi-structured interview, you ask the same questions. That is in theory. In theory, in other words, it's not in practice. Now let's hear what happens in practice. In practice, every person interviewed is asked mostly the same topics. Mostly the same topics. We ask the same topics, not the same questions. We are saying the interview guide has got topics to be covered, but under the topic, you still have to ask questions. So all those topics must be covered, but not always the same questions. It means underneath the topic, you are not going to ask exactly the same questions, but the questions would relate to that topic that under which they fall. As the whole point of a guide is that it guides the direction of the conversation, but does not command it. Now, let me tell you what happens in open-ended interviews, as particularly semi-structured interviews. You can ask the first question. Say, for instance, your first question is the same to all your respondents, but you must remember they will not respond the same way because it is open-ended. You will ask a person, why do you eat fig fruits? What do you eat figs? The other one would say, I eat figs because I feel hungry. The other one would say, I eat figs because they taste better. The other one would say, I eat figs because they are nutritious. The other one would say, like me, I eat figs because they are indigenous fruits. So there's a lot of these answers that might come. And most of the questions would be surprising. Now, in order to continue to question or to pose questions with a specific respondent who had a specific answer, you need to follow the answer that he provided or she provided. So you make a probe or you follow up based on the respondent's responses. Then it means this person is leading you now. From the first question, he starts leading you to show you where you need to ask questions. Now, that is the flexibility that is there in semi-structured. You see, the interview is structured in a way that because I lead the interviews and I request the respondent to provide answers, and that my questions are pre-written in a guide in a form of topics where questions should be derived. So that is being semi-structured. If it is fully structured, it is structured, and it doesn't have open-ended questions, then it means the question would be exactly the same You cannot ask a different question to someone. You only ask what you have asked the previous respondent, and what you have asked to the previous respondent, then you must still ask the next respondent. And sometimes you even provide the answers so that your respondents would be able to select. We would have an example of this as we move forward. But here in the interview guide, you see the responses, um, the questions, specific questions are not exactly the same. The guide is typically between 5 and 10 questions or question areas. You see, 5 to 10 question areas or questions, sometimes with suggested follow up or prompt questions. And I think I've got examples here to show how has presented this example of the interview guide. This interview guide had 13 questions. He or she just said the questions would be between 5 and 10. But here we found that his guide has 13 questions. So it means it's not prescriptive, is not exactly 10. One can play between 5 and 10, but it can even go a little bit further than 10. 13 is a little bit beyond, but it's not too much. It's not very far from 10. So in that way, we see that there is flexibility. And the other thing that I want to indicate that although the author said that the questions should be between 5 and 10, um, the the questions do have sub questions, or they've got questions that are supposed to be there to assist in a follow-up or in probing. And I'm going to demonstrate that one. And I will want us to go to sub questions that are supporting question 4. Here, I just took a snapshot of um, all the first questions 1 to 4 so that you can see where 4 ended. And you can read here, 4 reads like, at what point did you realize that being first general or world class set you apart from your peers? So I'm going to show you that you will see this question repeated in the next slide, so that below it I can show to you what was asked. I could not list all those sub questions here because the slide is going to be very busy. Now, here is 4 now. Let me read for you. You will be able to see it is a repetition of the previous question. At what point did you realize? You see, is that repetition. But if you look below 4, we've got 1 to 5. And you can see that from 4, we went straight to 5. From sub question 5, which is under 4, then we step over to question number 5, just to indicate that indeed question 4 had sub questions. And I don't know if indeed question 5 also had sub questions. So questions can be more than 5. Now, here I'm doing, if we were to have 13 questions, other questions had sub questions. So at the end, you might find that these questions are even 20 because others are sub. So I want also to indicate that in my case, the purpose of this slide that you see here is from my study. This is the development of a tourism framework for sustainable development at the catchment of Lake Funduzi. And here, the purpose here is to zoom into the number of questions in line with HEST guidelines, so that I can show that I also did not play within 10 and within 5 and 10. I was not even 13. I had a lot because I had at least more. I think I had eight questions or 8 areas where the focus is, and each of the area did have sub questions. And I want to show that these are the areas where I was I was focusing on in my interview guide: marketing, integration, environmental, planning, social, economic, product development, and infrastructure. There are 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And in those, I want to show you that some had a lot, such as the social section that had up to 22 questions that I had. And I believe that in between, I was making sure that if the respondent does not give me the questions, at least I would have those questions reminding me to ask him or her of the things that I think she must or he must respond to as part of follow-up. So follow-up questions were swallowed in all these questions. So you can see that the social started at 3.1 and ended at 3.22. So it was 22 questions. Now you can see that immediately after number 3, which was social, there was infrastructure, which was number 4. And it means from number 4, we come to a new set of questions. But some of the sections had very, very small questions. You see, product development had the least questions, and even planning had the least. All of them had 3. I only left 6.3 from product development, but planning, you can see, has 8.1 to 8.3. You see, so although I did not have follow-up questions, a batch of questions per section ensured that I would cover the follow-ups, and I could use those sub-questions as follow-ups. And these examples indicate that you cannot be exact with what with the number of questions that that should be asked. As we have seen, the author himself has or herself had more than 10. It was 13, although there was a suggestion or guidelines that it should be between 5 and 10. If we can continue, we read that these interviews generally take place in a quiet place, not a busy walk away during a festival, and are recorded. So we don't want it to be done in a busy area because it will interfere with it will distract the interaction. If I'm asking you questions and there are there are movements or activities taking place, if you are a respondent, you would lose interest and you would pay attention to other things. Then this would disturb the interview engagement or interaction. The recordings are transcribed, and those transcriptions then become the data that is analyzed. And if there is noise, if it is in a busy area where the recording is taking place, it means there will be the noise will interfere with the recording, and it will be difficult for the technology to transcribe. So there will be interference and pollution of the data that is being collected. So we need a quiet place there is no one, and it should be the interviewee and the interviewer. The conventional length of one of these types of interviews is between 1 hour and 2 hours, optimally 90 minutes. Because the author feels that less than an hour, 1 hour does not allow for much development of questions and thoughts, and 2 hours or more is a lot of time to ask someone to sit still and answer questions. So in other words, there is an advice here that we should not be very long. We should not sit very long with these respondents, or we should not pay a lip service and just sit for 30 minutes and depart. But I remember in my case, the face-to-face interview, I think the average time was 45 minutes. And I could go to an hour, I could go beyond an hour, but I rarely had interviews that were less than 45 minutes. So an hour and 45 minutes is just 15 minutes a difference. And it depends on the extent to which respondents are willing to engage and they're giving responses. So if they speak faster, then the interview is faster. Or if they don't have a lot to offer, so the interview session will even be shorter. So there's a lot at play here. It cannot be me determining or deciding that it should be an hour, it should be 2 hours, because I will sit there and nobody will give me responses. If somebody has given me responses, I must move on. And if nobody's speaking to me, I must also leave the place to go to the next research participant. If you have a lot of ground to cover and the person is willing, 2 separate interview sessions are recommended, with the second session being slightly shorter than the first. For an example, 90 minutes the first day, which is 1.5 hours, and 60 minutes the second, which is just an hour. And I think I'm going to have a comment on this. Um, particularly if talking about two separate sessions, because in some of the strategies of collecting data, two sessions are automatic depending on the design itself and depending on the techniques for data collection. And I'll be able to share with you later on. I will show you, in other words, the determinant of the 2 days and where 2 days is actually not even necessary. There are lots of good reasons for this, but the most compelling one is that this is the reason for us to have two sessions if our respondents and participants are willing. Now, the compelling reason, according to the author, is that this allows you to listen to the first day's recording and catch anything interesting you might have missed in the moment, and so develop follow-up questions that can probe further. And I do agree with him that at the first phase or in the first interaction with the research participant, it might be that they mention some things that you 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 don't you are not able to make follow-up, or it does not trigger you to make those follow-ups. But when you are away, you think, no, but this respondent mentioned this one, I should have followed on this one. Then it means that tomorrow when I go back to him or to her, I can continue to make probes on these specific statements or on the responses that were presented to me. And the second aspect is that this also allows the person being interviewed to have some time to think about the issues raised in the interview and go a little deeper with their answers. Yes, indeed. The person who has been interviewed, if they feel that what they've provided is not sufficient, they can tomorrow say no. But yesterday, you asked me about this, and what I mentioned, I felt I can add on it, or I only mentioned this, but there is this side of the story. Then, in other words, the author is indicating that it offers an opportunity to the two of you. But a question that we can ask is, uh, remember when you are a visitor and you are a researcher, it doesn't mean that participants are interested on your research project. And if there is no interest, uh, some might not even be interested on having the second interview. That is why the author is saying, if indeed they agree, or if they give you an opportunity to go back, then you can schedule the second one, which is a follow-up interview. And here I've got a slide that is going to show you data collection strategies or techniques during participatory action research. And I will show you how it caters for follow-up interviews and how it automatically schedules a follow-up interview. And it is mainly because data collection is repetitive in 5 stages, that there are 5 stages that have been presented, or 5 opportunities that were presented in the field due to the type of research that has offered an opportunity to make follow-up on earlier interviews. The figure below here, which is entitled data collection, has left out the final catchment meeting during data collection. Though, in other words, it should be presenting 5 subsequent stages. It should have at least 6 stages of data collection, and I will explain them to you soon. You see, consecutive stages allowed the researcher to follow up on earlier issues, and then you can cover the interviewer and their respondent or the research participant. The interviewer guide was mainly used during transect walks. But let me tell you how I'm going to present these data collection stages to you now. And let me first state to you that during participatory action research, and 4 groups were established in order to collect data. So the establishment of 4 groups is the same as in the case of focus group interviews, where you establish a number of focus groups. So it is the same. But what happens during participatory action research is more than what happens during focus group interviews. And at some stage, I'll be able to present the two research designs, and you will see what participatory action research entails and what focus group interviews entail. And now I have just included under the stages of data collection, and I've just included something that is referred to as a topic guide as part of it. It's because even before you could go to the field, there is a need to actually prepare the topic guide, which is a tool, an instrument with which you're gonna collect data. It is the one that we were talking about that has been written, topic guide in brackets, unstructured interviews. So I have included in my figure that before you collect data, when you go to the field, you have got a duty to prepare the data collection instrument, which is a topic guide. But the specific stages of collecting data when you are engaging with the interviews or the research participants, the first one was the tribal council meetings. Colleagues, in the tribal council meetings, the main purpose was for gaining entry. And in gaining entry, it is where you are asking permission to go into the site so that you can collect data. Here you ask permission. In rural areas, you have got tribal leaders, you have got tribal authorities that must allow you permission to go in. But during the process of asking permission, you must remember you present the research topic, you present the research topic, the research questions, the purpose of their research, and you are asked questions. How will the community, how will the research participants benefit? How will the people in the village uh, benefit? And if you remember, there is some things that have got to do ethical, to do with the ethics. And this is the reason why you ask permission. And the reason why you go to the field is because your research proposal and yourself have been cleared, you have been seen to comply with the ethical code of conduct and as provided for by the University of South Africa. So all these things had to do with ethics. All these things had to do with collecting the data. Therefore, you will gather some data that is also going to contribute in the research approach. Remember, you're going to rewrite the research approach section. You're going to rewrite at the end of the study your chapter 3 or your chapter 4, where you have written and presented your research methodology, your approach to the study, and when you go to the field. So, tribal council meetings is all the very first engagement with the community, the very first engagement with people that are going to provide data. Remember, in you don't exclude tribal authorities or tribal leaders in the collection of data. For an example, in participatory action research, when groups were established, we had to put one criteria as leadership. And we said tribal leaders and those that are in charge of land management should be included. So they will be engaged with in subsequent stages of data collection. And from tribal council meetings, there the first data collection strategy was the development of maps, which are the process is then referred to as participatory mapping, where you do deep data collection for the first time there through the development of maps, where the research participants or the respondents are plugging various points where the tourism interests are, the tourism resources are, they develop map. And when they're doing that, they are discussing the problems and the challenges and the opportunities facing those resources that they are identifying. If the resources are threatened, they will talk about them. If the resources are well protected, or if the resources are many or they are fewer, they will discuss about them because they will need to demonstrate that these tourism resources will form a basis of developing the tourism attractions or the tourism product. So these the development of maps triggers a whole lot of discussions, and there data is being collected. And situational analysis is a process that immediately follows the process of developing the map, because you analyze what you have plugged, the resources that have been plugged on various points. From there, you conduct a tour, you visit all points that have been identified on a map. You indicate routes that will be followed. Then you say, we will identify 3 points. We will identify 3 tourism resources that we will visit. In this case, say for instance, the lake itself, one of the rivers, one of the sacred trees, and one of the fountains, or one of the mountains had to be visited. So you follow the route while you're collecting data, so that on the route you and the research participants are discussing tourism resources, and you witness and verify those points that have been identified on the map. So they take you there. So during situational analysis, that is where the interview guide also become very, very useful. And you start to ask people to clarify a lot of concepts relating to social, to environmental, to development, to product development. So they are actually assisting you to gather data that is related to those topics that have been identified in the research, in the interview guide. And from there, when they sit down and plan on how tourism resources will be developed, and they wrap up everything, and they put actions to pursue tourism development under planning, you are also collecting data, because they're telling you, we will develop the fountain, or we will protect the fountain, we will develop hiking trails to take us to the mountain, to take us under the trees, or to follow this specific route. So that is where the consolidation of data is taking place. And I'm saying, from from the tribal council to participatory mapping, you are discussing what happened during tribal councils. And then in situational analysis, you are discussing what happens in tribal council meetings and participatory action mapping, if there are things to make follow up. And in project works and planning, you are also discussing what happened in earlier stages. So this is why I said this design with the techniques of collecting data, these 5, including the last one, which was the final planning meeting at the catchment, they provide an opportunity to revisit earlier interview interactions and to actually make follow-ups on things that might have been forgotten.
Thank you, Doc. Yeah, ish. These things they are getting clearer, but at some time again, they are a bit confusing. Um,
Okay.
Maybe one should find out when we're talking to the issue of the interview guide, we said 5 to 10 questions, but we can have more. But then my question would
Yes.
be, I think I've got 2 questions. The other one would be, are you allowed to use open ended questions and closed ended questions? Or is it that you'll have an open ended question, then followed by a follow up where a person would be elaborating? That's my first question. And then the other one, with the research, with the interview guide, uh, let's say for an example, with the research question, you'll find that maybe it's 1 or 2 questions. When we go to
Yes.
to the interview guide, are you then allowed to put more questions so that you can get more out of the participants for you to be able to get alignment or to get answers to the phenomena that is under study? Those are my 2 questions. I
Okay.
hope I'm clear. Hey.
You let me first answer the first one. Then you will repeat this second one. The first one is talking about the inclusion of open-ended and close-ended questions in an interview guide. Now, the way in which this author is explaining it is that unstructured interviews require open-ended questions. And in other words, you do not have closed-ended questions, because closed-ended questions brings in quantitative data. And if we talk now about quantitative data, then it is quantitative research. So a mixture of quantitative questions and open-ended questions, or qualitative questions, which are open-ended, and then quantitative, which are closed-ended. If you mix the two of them, then it is mixed method research. And now, if you are 100% unstructured, it means you are qualitative, 100% qualitative, and you don't have a quantitative question. So all of them are open-ended. Just repeat the second one for me, the second question.
Okay, the second question was saying we have the research questions, and you might find that maybe in the research questions there are two questions that
Mm.
were asked. Then we go to the interview guide. Are you going to have only the two questions, or you are allowed to put more questions for you to be able to get more information on the phenomena that is being studied?
Oh, are you saying if I have two questions from my research project,
Yes,
or my research project has got two questions only, but I'm going to the study guide. You want to know the
according
guide,
to the
sorry, the
interview
interview
guide.
guide, how many questions should
Yes,
an interview guide have? Ne? Oh,
yes.
yes, now I hear you now. Okay, the interview guide is dependent on what topics you want to cover. And these topics are not necessarily from the the research questions. Okay, let me make another explanation now. Remember, you might find that your two research questions cannot be answered by two questions. An example is, if one of your research question is asking you about the theory and the principles of theory that assist you to achieve the study objectives. In my case, for an example, say I'm researching on organizational design, and my research question was on what are the principles of organizational design, or can an exploration or and implementation of the principles of organizational design assist catchment management agencies to manage their water management area better. You might find that when I read the principles, I had 7 principles, and in order to actually give effect to those 7 principles, so that I can either test or compare the principles with the findings. From each principles, I ask 2 questions. Already, if my principles are 7, then I've got 14 questions. You see? Or if I can group my principles, and for each of the uh, and I group them 2, then I would have at least 4 questions. And sorry, 4 subheadings. Eh? Those 4 subheadings under them, then I generate 2 questions, 2 questions, 2 questions. Is 2 questions times 4 is 14 questions. You see, therefore, I cannot be confined to my research questions if I go to the interview guide. Uh, in my case, I had you saw that the subheading social had up to 22 sub questions. Those I did not ask all of those, but they were guiding me to make sure that I don't forget areas where I think to probe. I must probe. So I had too many questions, but I had only 8 areas to ask questions. So according to this author, if I only had 8 headings, even if I did not have subheadings, he was going to be satisfied that I have followed what he guided. But this author went on to say, you can have sub questions to assist you in probing. In other words, even if I had 8, I can even have sub questions. So 8, if each one of them has got 2, 8 times um, 8 times 2 is 16. Or in my case, you would even have more than 60 or 70, because I even have 22, 40, 3 and 3, some cases 10, and so on. You see, it depends on the topic that we are exploring. And you see, in my case, I did not even hide that I had too many questions, sub questions. And that's why I attached my interview guide as an appendix. So the study leader, the university itself, external examiners, all of them have accepted that, and it was not shot down. So I think the interview guide can it's not dependent on the research questions. It should be dependent on what the researcher thinks should be covered, which data he should cover, he should collect, so that he achieves the objectives of the study. But it's not dependent on the number of questions in the guide and in the research, the original main research questions. Any other comment? I see there are no hands. Then if there are no hands, we need to continue. Maybe the pace is slow. I see that we are we are only left with 15 minutes. Sure, they're going to the time is going to lock us out. But the good thing is, now that we have opened the phase for data collection, we can still treat all this under any of the workshops. Okay, let me start from the other comment here. The other comment says, I think introverts were mentioned as good interviewers because they talk less. and in interviews, participants are the ones who should be talking, not another way around. I also do be that is another view of seeing it. Maybe it's correct, yes. I accept that one. Thank you very much. But let's come to, how do the interviews differ from focus group discussion? I think, colleagues, other authors call focus group discussions as another type of interviews. But the difference that I see is that in these interviews that I'm presenting here, it is face to face. It is yourself as a data collector and a study participant who is the respondent. You are two. The other one is asking questions. The other one responds. And now, in focus groups, you have got a group of people. And you would see when we deal with the focus group discussions or focus group interviews, they will talk about dominant characters who would want to dominate discussions. And those can even sway the discussion so that other participants are moved to agree with what they say, because they're so vocal and they're so argumentative. Then there, the researcher or the data collector must be very good in controlling groups, because you've got too many people and you want to record what is objective. Some people think that you must record objective things or things that are agreeable between groups, but some other people will influence other participants to agree to things that are not real, because they cannot out argue a person. So you have got more role to play to regulate and to ensure equal participation of all the people. Because these people that are called introverts do not talk, as the other one has said here. They do not talk a lot. Although they know things, they can keep quiet. Or they can wait for an opportunity to be pinpointed. Onanani, can you tell us your view? Then it means you should be able to establish the types of people in groups, those that are vocal and those that are quiet. So you want to stimulate discussions that everybody must contribute in the way that when you collect data, you actually get a total picture, not one-sided. So you've got more role to facilitate. In focus groups, you facilitate. On one-on-one, interviews, you are asking one person, you're asking that person a question. You are facilitating the discussion. You are facing one person. There's not have anybody who can say no, you are lying. Oh no, no, I can add to you. He is the only source of information. So I think that is the difference between the two. Any other comment or any? Can you, who commented about this introvert, say something about the introvert and this question that I was trying to respond to? Mwahatu, Johannes, can you, do you want to make a comment in terms of the focus group interviews and the one-on-one interview and the role of this interviewer with respect to the introverts or even the extroverts?
Good
evening.
My understanding here was just that, I commented on that introvert
Yes.
because introverts are generally people who will, like you have stated earlier, that are people who will just not say anything in any setting until they are pinpointed. So maybe they were regarded as good listeners or interviewers, because they will listen, they will give the interviewees the chance to say whatever they say. Unlike in the case of the extroverts, who most of the time they talk, they are outspoken, they will maybe overpower the people who are supposed to be interviewed. But coming back to what you have specifically asked me, uh,
Mm.
the, the focus group, for me, it's a setting where you have a lot of people who will be giving you the feedback on whatever you have asked, like a council or a meeting, where you'll be there sitting, and there are people who, some might not talk, as like in this case, our introverts, and then they might be having a point, but they might not talk because of maybe, I don't know. The introverts, they just don't talk because they are maybe afraid sometimes. And with the interview, what is that, the semi-structured, or the interview where it's a one-on-one? I think it's a one-on-one where you give a person,
Yes.
it's just the interview and the interviewer. I think that's where the difference. The other one is a group, a focus group, and the other one is just the two of you, the interview and the interview. That's my understanding. I will
Yeah, no,
stop.
thank you very much. But do you
Okay.
think, can you say the introverts are good? Or you see, in a group, in focus groups, they
Yes.
compromise discussions. They keep quiet while they know things and they allow themselves to be bullied or to be overpowered by other people. Are they good?
I think not necessarily that, but I just think that's the nature of the people that they are, until they are pinpointed. If maybe you say Twan in my case, and then I'll say something. But if something is not said or I'm not pinpointed, you just die inside. That's introverts, actually. I think that's how I understand this.
It's quite interesting. Yeah, there is a comment here from Cecily Ndela. She says introverts tend to listen more and prefer to sit back and
Yes,
observe before
exactly.
venturing to respond. But you know the good thing about the introverts, these people, they are very strong. They keep quiet and they assimilate and analyze the situation. What they say, you will not move. But because we who are extroverts, we talk everything, little things, big things, medium, small things. You see, we talk everything. But they are those people who are very strategic. They choose strategic statements to make. They are good at making closing statements. And when they wrap it up for you, you cannot move them. They are a boom. Yeah, that is how I can describe them. So I think I must stop here and thank you very much for participating. And we are going to focus um, on the construction of a questionnaire. So we will also look at the we'll look at the this interview guide that I made reference to. We are going to look at it. How do we construct it? Then we will know what to include and what to exclude and how it should be structured. Everything pertaining to the content. And this is based on its purpose. The same will apply to questionnaire. We will not run away from questionnaire because somewhere in between here, I was going to indicate that a questionnaire is not an interview guide. And a questionnaire which is standardized does not constitute an interview. It is a survey. We will talk about that because there is a question that emanated the other time. What is the difference between what is a survey? And then I made reference to the use of a questionnaire and the use of an interview guide. Then it will boil to us defining what an interview guide is used for and what a questionnaire is used for. So we'll do this next week, but we will do it when we talk about the development of these instruments. But whatever is not finished here, we can touch. I will make highlights, touch here and there, so that it builds a basis as we continue to talk about these instruments. Yeah, let me stop here. But thank you very much. We'll focus on that next week.